On the 10th day of October, Halloween gave to me 10 Catholic monsters, 9 priests a-miracling, 8 Jerry's vamping, 7 Jody's oinking, 6 body swapping, 5 Reed's a-wolfing, 4 drunken uncles, 3 werewolf colonies, 2 spooky sisters, and a psycho who killed Janet Leigh. Hey everyone, welcome back to another of the 31 days of Halloween. In this case, it is October 10th. This is a very special day. Not only is it the conclusion of the look at Midnight Mass, the new Mike Flanagan series, but it is also my birthday. So happy birthday to me, and feel free to shower me with gifts and praise. And drop by one of the social media channels. We're on the Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. There's a Facebook group that you can join. Just search for Legion Podcasts. At any rate, drop by, say hello. I would very much love to hear other people's reaction to this series. And as with the previous episode, this will be very spoiler heavy, so please, if you have an interest in seeing Midnight Mass and want to know as little as possible about it, which I recommend, then stop right here. You can come back tomorrow. Like the little goofy day counting stuff does not give anything away, so you can continue to listen to the series, and I promise I will not spoil Midnight Mass besides this particular conversation. So, about Midnight Mass, let's get into it. The first episode yesterday was on episodes 1 through 3, in which we learned the sort of origin story of our Monsignor, who had run into what he referred to as an angel, but was this creature that was clearly vampiric in nature, and one thing led to another, and sure enough, he's a vampire. Not in the strictest sense, not growing things and that kind of thing, but for a series that began reminding me very much of like a Needful Things, it's just so difficult not to compare Mike Flanagan work with Stephen King. But in this case, this felt very much to me like a Needful Things kind of situation. Up until the vampire makes an appearance, I was like, oh, this isn't Needful Things, this is Salem's Lot. And that just becomes more true. We have our group of unlikely vampire hunters, although not in the strictest sense. They're more interested in trying to get off the island to bring back help, but then once they realize that things have progressed a little bit further than they had hoped, the mission quickly becomes, oh, we just can't let these things leave. And that's really the thrust of the last episode or two in particular, particularly the last episode. So we're going to be talking about episodes 4, 5, 6, and 7 kind of in total. And one thing that I was worried about in the previous episode that I gave mention to was the notion that they were going to kind of drop this idea of faith and religion and what happens when you die and all of that. And they don't. In fact, Mike Flanagan, who wrote and directed the last episode, and of course directed every episode of Midnight Mass, he makes kind of a bold choice in that he sort of asks the question, what happens when you die? This grand question that haunts us all is like the big question, right? Like, what is the nature of our existence? Is it something that goes on after us? Is this it? And I have been of different minds about that as the years have gone by. I would say that I have moved from atheist to agnostic, where I don't know, and maybe it's just that there are no atheists in foxholes, and what is your later years, if not a foxhole, where you know that death is coming for you, and so you start to think about these things of like, what is going to happen? Is there nothing? And there's a really poignant conversation between the character of Riley and of Kate Siegel's character, Erin, after she has not a miscarriage. It's due to the effects of the blood given to the entire parish. Her body sort of rejects the baby. The baby just stops existing. And so this child that she describes and says, you know, this is this child, this unborn child, saved my life in a lot of ways, just vanishes. And so she and Riley have this very serious conversation about like, well, what do you think happens? Like, where do you think your child is? It's not quite phrased like that, but that's what we get around to. And it's an interesting kind of counterpoint, because Riley is very much of the mind that, well, nothing happens. You know, it's oblivion. And for his character kind of wants oblivion. You know, he's haunted by this terrible act of this car accident where he inadvertently killed someone, and that haunts him. And Riley on the other, or not Riley, but Erin on the other hand, has a very traditional look at here's what heaven is and what heaven is like. And she goes on and on about it. And then at the end of the series, Erin is mortally wounded. And she revises her answer, or answers for herself as opposed to answers for this unborn child. And her answer is at once spiritual, not quite religious, but cosmic. And it's something that I think is really beautiful. And there's a line that she has that reminds me a lot of a Bill Hicks line. And I wonder if Mike Flanagan didn't kind of crib it from Bill Hicks, but she says, I forgot, when I think of myself, that's the mistake, is that I forget that the self doesn't matter. That, you know, all the time that, you know, that my fingertips are the electrons of my skin are doing a dance with the electrons of the earth beneath my hand. And that all I am, that all of this is the cosmic energy. It's where we came from and it's where we go. And that our lives are the cosmos dreaming of itself. And it's a really beautiful sentiment. I don't know that it's the most satisfying answer, but then again, what you're asking one of the biggest questions in the history of asking questions about things. So I think it's remarkable that the show has that ambition and dares to try to answer it. And so I do think that the show gets that part right. Like it fulfills the promise of that question, and whether or not that leaves you satisfied or not is a different question. And I found it to be very moving, and I found it to be very satisfying. Maybe not the answer I agree with, but certainly the answer that I think matters, you know, for in the context of the show, and it doesn't drop the ball on that. But there's also other answers given. There are other expressions of faith that you see at the end of the show, where in some cases religion is about comfort, or it's about forgiveness, or it's about bonding, or, you know, all of these things, all these ways that religion binds us to one another and answers questions for ourselves. And in some cases it's a tool used for evil, and the show certainly points that out as well. But it doesn't do a both sidesism kind of thing where it just raises the question and then presents all these different views of religion, but doesn't bother to give a perspective. It very much has a perspective, and I really appreciated that. So thematically, I think the show delivers. I thought it was daring in a lot of ways. I know it's sort of cliche to call a show brave, but for a show to traffic in those kinds of ideas, I do think is fairly brave, and I think Midnight Mass should be credited for being bold in that way. And now, what about the show itself? So, Mike Flanagan never saw a monologue he didn't like. If I had one complaint with the show, it's that every character kind of has that moment where they just look to another person and deliver a monologue, and sometimes those are great, and sometimes it feels like you're listening to a monologue. And that's not to say I didn't enjoy it. I did very much. I really, really liked Midnight Mass. It felt like reading Salem's Lot, and partly that is because it is the story of a small town where all of a sudden there's this sort of plague of vampirism. Although it gets to that business pretty quickly in the latter episodes, but there are those moments of like, hey, we're assembling our team of vampire hunters, and we've got some scientific evidence. There's a great conversation between Aaron and Annabeth Gish's character, the doctor, the daughter of, surprise, Alex Esso, who played the old woman, her mother, and is kind of great, as Alex Esso always is in the last couple of episodes, where she's allowed to be herself, be her own age, and emote and not just be an old woman in old age makeup. Although that was pretty good. I didn't realize it was Alex Esso, at least until episode 5 or 6, where it's like, wait a second. Mike Flanagan, I see what you're doing. You're trying to sneak an Alex Esso into this show. Oh, and she's been there the whole time. Very sneaky, Mike Flanagan. But there's a great conversation between Aaron and Annabeth Gish, where they talk about, all right, let's, again, this is all spoilers, so if you're listening this far, then, you've done this to yourself. But Riley, surprisingly, does not end up being the main character, and there's a question of like, well, whose movie is this? And it's really the story of the Monsignor in a lot of ways, but it's also an ensemble story, and it's not just one person's story. It's kind of the story of this town and all the characters in it. And if there's a flaw in, aside from the fact that everyone's a monologist in this town, aside from that fault, if there's another fault in the story, it's that, hey, the character that you kind of enter the story with is taken away from you rather abruptly at the end of the 5th episode. But it's a great scene. It's a great moment. One of the best things I've seen on Twitter recently is people complaining about Netflix doing that autoplay bullshit. And it's like, no. At the end of episode 5, which is the one where Riley rows out into the middle of nowhere, or out into the bay with Aaron, and tells her what's happened and what's going on in the town, but is also infected and knows that as soon as the sun comes up, he's going to burn up. But he wants that oblivion, right? Like, that's what he's going for. And it's a nice moment when he goes. But the flip side of that is almost this Saint Maud-esque reaction, where while Riley is having this vision of the ghost that has been haunting him, only now she's whole and waiting for him and welcoming him into the light, so to speak. While that's happening, Aaron, aka Kate Siegel, is left with the absolute horror of seeing this guy burst into flames in the rowboat across from her. And she starts screaming, and you cut to credits. But as the credits are playing, you keep hearing her scream, and Netflix, because they do that autoplay thing, it just rolls into the next episode while that's still going on. You're like, no, wait, this is still stuff I want to see. Like, I need to live with this moment for 2 seconds, please. And there's just no way to turn. I think you can turn it off, like on the PC, but on the app that I was using, I couldn't find a way to turn it off. So that moment was lessened a little bit just because of the nature of streaming services, but it is nonetheless really affecting. But yeah, as Aaron is telling Annabeth Gish all about, hey, here's what happened. You're never going to believe what happened to Riley today, by the way. But there's this moment where she says, well, I didn't realize how crazy I am until I said what I told you this story and I heard myself saying this, and now I realize that I'm completely crazy. And in once again, a very Stephen King move, Annabeth Gish is like, well, if we're just going to be two friends being crazy together, let me show you something that's fucking bonkers. And then that's the core of our vampire hunters. And then we bring in, Alex Esso, the mother, and then we bring in the sheriff. And it's really a nice moment. And there's also a great character turn for the Monsignor, for Father Paul, in this particular show, where as the show goes on, he realizes like, oh, this is a real, the road to hell is paved with good intentions kind of thing, where he thought he was going to be able to save the woman that he loved, Alex Esso, that at the end of the day, while a lot of this was his own, pride and also rationalizing what had happened to him, and but he also thought he could save the woman he loved, and that they would have a chance to have a life together that they missed. And there's a great moment between Alex Esso and Father Paul where she says, like, we missed our chance, and that's okay. That's how it's supposed to go. Like, we're supposed to fade away, and our daughter is supposed to have our life. And because the order of that is upset, they kind of pay the ultimate price for that. And that's true of a lot of moments. And I said in yesterday's episode that one thing I liked about Mike Flanagan is that he has kind of a mean streak. And there is definitely some of that in particularly the last episode, which is just the Carnage episode where it's vampires run amok. And you just have dudes like confused as to what the fuck is going on, confessing like, I think I just killed my wife and my kids and I don't understand what's happening to me. And that kind of stuff. And that's the stuff that I find really like horrifying and really not upsetting, but like that's the more like existential kind of terror of this show. Like this show doesn't go in for a lot of jump scares and that kind of thing. And there's a little bit of dread, but for the most part, it's kind of aiming higher. It's a much more esoteric kind of show than either Hill House or Bly Manor. And even though those play with some heady ideas at times, that's what this show is. This show is nothing but heady ideas. And also, as we talked about yesterday, the theme of addiction runs through this too, of, you get this hunger inside you, and some people give into it, some people don't. And that's not really a moral judgment, but it is also a testament to their character to some degree. But it's really good. It's a really well done show. And it's one of those things that, much like Dr. Sleep, it's like you feel like you can just kind of sink into it. And it's a show that I'm looking forward to. Like, if I ever get really sick or I break my leg and I gotta lay in bed for a week or whatever, like, this is a day where I just let this show unfold. And I enjoyed all the characters. I like the fact that, is the evil gone from this place is left somewhat vague. It doesn't put a final... it doesn't dot the I and cross the T on that completely, although the implication is that Kate Siegel has been able to cripple the main vampire in such a way that he's probably not going to make it to shore, that he's going to burn up on the way. And I don't believe that we ever see that. If I blinked and I missed it, then, correct me in the comments. But another thing I really liked about it is that main vampire was almost entirely just an animal. Like, he doesn't ever really speak. There's one point where they kind of play dress up with him, but that doesn't last very long, because at the end of the day, his animal nature comes out. And I like the fact that when it's feeding, it completely, and the other vampires kind of exhibit this trait as well, that once the addiction takes over, the hunger takes over, and they start feeding, then there's just no distracting them. And that's also kind of the downfall of these creatures in a lot of ways. Maybe it's a little quick in how quickly it sets up what the ultimate threat is, and then resolves that threat all in the space of the final episode. But again, that's kind of fine, because at a certain point, the plot details only matter so much in a show like this, because it's really much more about the characters and their relationships to each other, and how those relationships resolve themselves in the final episodes, as well as the themes. And I think all of that is handled quite well. So, I really enjoyed Midnight Mass. I still think, in terms of just being a great scare film or series, that Haunting of Hill House is probably the superior show in terms of it just being a great ghost story. But Midnight Mass is quite good. Midnight Mass is a real achievement. Anytime somebody can put together long-form horror like this and not have it be just a nightmare and fall apart completely by the end, is an achievement. And even more so when you're, tackling ideas like, what is the nature of the afterlife, and what is the role of religion in our lives, and how religion can be both a comfort and a weapon depending on who's using it and how. All that stuff I think is really interesting and really wonderful. And I recommend it. If you haven't seen Midnight Mass, God, I've spoiled the hell out of it. But it's great, and if you enjoyed it, or if you saw it and you didn't enjoy it, let me know why. I can certainly see that argument. If you're not kind of down for the more heady ideas being laid out in this show, and you're not there for the characters. Like, if you want a Hill House where, it's, let me pick out all the ghosts and the scenes and stuff, I'm almost tempted to say, like, Hill House feels like the 100 level class, and Midnight Mass is like the 300 level class, where this is not entry level student kind of horror show. It's more like, hey, this is right before you do your thesis on Mike Flanagan, which, again, let your conscience be your guide. I'm not going to tell you how to enjoy a series or how not to enjoy a series, but I think maybe Midnight Mass is the more ambitious of the shows, but I could also, fall back into Haunting of Hill House very easily, and very well might over the Halloween season again, just to go back through it, because I think it's terrific. But I think Midnight Mass is quite good. And like I said, I'm very curious what you folks think about this. So please look us up on the social media with Legion Podcasts as your search term, and you will find me. Or you can always drop me a line directly at legionpodcasts.com. One last pitch before we wrap things up here on my birthday show. I really, really would appreciate it if you enjoy us doing this kind of stuff. I think Gary's going to be doing some 31 Days of Halloween reviews as well on his own. So if you appreciate the stuff that we're doing here on Legion Podcast, please drop by iTunes or wherever it is that you get your podcasts, and like and review and all that stuff. And it